The great motorsports commentator Paul Page once said about the Indianapolis 500 that danger is a constant, but it's man and machine's ability to overcome the danger, not only to push through the fear of it, but to conquer it, survive it, is what separates the racing driver from the common man. In this video, you'll learn just that, as we look at several crashes throughout the years at the Indianapolis 500 that you'll hardly believe. But just remember, in the eternal words of the legendary Steve Evans, each of these drivers walked away. This is IndyCar, and they walked away, Part 2, the Indianapolis 500. My previous video on this subject started with the dramatic crash of Kevin Cogan at the start of the 1989 Indianapolis 500, which his car split in half and impacted the end of the pit wall. Somehow, Cogan not only survived the accident, but walked away from what otherwise looked to be a lethal crash. While Cogan may have been the first, he certainly wasn't the last to walk away from an untimely meeting with the attenuated barrier at the end of the pit wall. In 1994, Scott Goodyear tasted the styrofoam in his Budweiser Lola. Goodyear thankfully didn't take a direct hit. One driver who wasn't so lucky was Billy Boat, practicing in 2003, who took a direct impact and was launched back onto the racing surface. Luckily, no other cars were involved. Just a year later, Sam Hornish Jr., Darren Manning, and Greg Ray all found the end of the pit wall in a scary multi-car incident. 2 years after that, it was Thomas Scheckter who would make heavy contact. Oriol Servia then hit it while attempting to qualify for the 2012 race. Ditto Pippa Mann, who hit it in 2015 during practice. The most recent example was Spencer Pigot at the end of the 2020 race, sparking some online controversy over the race finishing under yellow, but when that barrier is hit, it requires a lengthy cleanup, one that would have been unrealistic to attempt with only 5 laps remaining in the race. Safety has come a long way in IndyCar racing, but just because the old days were more dangerous doesn't mean that the drivers didn't regularly cheat the Grim Reaper. Louis Meyer was one of the best ever to race at Indianapolis, becoming the race's first 3-time winner with wins in 1928, 1933, and 1936. After the 36th win, Meyer began the tradition of drinking milk in Victory Lane, buttermilk to be exact, as it was his favorite beverage. Meyer appeared headed for his 4th Indy win in 1939, but with 4 laps to go, lost control on an oil slick out of Turn 2, while chasing the leader and eventual winner, Wilbur Shaw's Maserati, down. Meyer's car impacted the wooden guardrail on the inside of the track, turning the Bose Seal Fast Special on its side and throwing Meyer onto the track. Miraculously, Meyer was unhurt and ran to safety, but with bare feet. His shoes had remained in the car when he was thrown out. The 3-time champion said this about the incident to ABC Sports in 1986.
And I lost the machine, and that's all she wrote. I was into the wall. When I was thrown out of the car and looked down into the turn, saw them cars coming, and I got off the track in a big hurry, and I made the decision right then that that was it.
For Jack Turner, it took a bit more than just one brickyard tumble to convince him that maybe racing in the Indy 500 isn't for everyone. In 1961, he was collected in this dramatic multi-car pileup, Turner's Roadster flipping wildly down the front stretch. Amazingly, Turner avoided any injuries in this incident. He wasn't so lucky in 1962. In a bizarrely similar accident, Jack Turner again got upside down on the main straight at Indianapolis in a chain reaction pileup. Cactus Jack once again escaped, but this time with some minor injuries. Almost inconceivably, when Turner returned to Indianapolis in 1963, he suffered his worst crash of all, when his car violently rolled in practice on, you guessed it, the main straightaway. The 3rd time was the charm for Jack Turner. After escaping his 3rd flip in as many years, he retired from racing in his hospital bed. I bet you didn't know Clay Regazzoni raced IndyCars. In 1977, the Ferrari Formula One driver was entered in the Indianapolis 500 by Theodore Racing. While practicing for the race, Regazzoni spun coming out of Turn 3 and crashed into a dirt embankment. His car then became ensnared in a wire fence and was thrown into the air. It was a miracle that the car stayed mostly upright as it landed in a smoldering heap. Regazzoni enthusiastically exited the broken McLaren and walked away. Regazzoni would manage to qualify for that Indianapolis 500 despite the accident, but only completed 25 laps in his only IndyCar start and finished 30th with a fuel leak. There might not be a more lucky escape at Indianapolis than Pancho Carter in 1987. While practicing, Carter lost control in turn 3, the car caught air underneath it and turned upside down, sliding for several hundred yards. While the crash on the surface looked bad enough, when the car was turned back over and Carter emerged unharmed, safety teams discovered that the rollover bar designed to protect the driver's head had been totally ground away by the pavement. By the end of the crash, Pancho's helmet was literally scraping the ground, an inch of foam and carbon fiber, the only thing protecting the helpless driver. Pancho came back and qualified for the race, but finished a disappointing 27th. One of the most bizarre accidents at Indianapolis was this flyer by Jim Crawford in 1990. After hitting the wall on the exit of Turn 1, the left rear wheel of Crawford's Lola Buick got underneath the car and sent the chassis nearly 10 feet into the air. Thankfully, Crawford's car stayed right side up, and the Scotsman walked away. The physics-bending crash caught the attention of the U.S. Navy, who awarded Crawford an honorary Wings of Gold, which is given to those who have learned how to fly. Another driver who caught some serious air in Turn 1 was Colton Herta last year during Carb Day, which I'm sure you'll remember. But this crash drew many comparisons to another suffered by another driver driving an Andretti 26 car. In his rookie Indianapolis 500 in 2003, Dan Wheldon was battling with Sam Hornish in the late stages of the event. Wheldon lost control, slapped the wall in turn 3, and the car turned over upside down. Dan walked away unharmed, as did Herta nearly 2 decades later. History tends to repeat itself at Indianapolis. A crash that no one will ever forget occurred in 2017 to the pole sitter of the race, Scott Dixon. Dixon had already had a brush with disaster earlier in the week when he was robbed in a Taco Bell drive-thru just hours after qualifying for the pole position at over 232 miles an hour. Early in the race, Jay Howard slapped the wall, an innocent enough looking crash until the car broke away from the wall and into the unsuspecting path of Scott Dixon. The car flew through the air for what seemed like ages until it came crashing down on top of the inside wall, splitting the car in half. The survival shell of the shattered race car protected its helpless passenger as the car tumbled. The crash in full speed can hardly be believed. Despite one of the most dramatic crashes of all time, Scott Dixon emerged on his own power, a testament to the safety of the race cars, and certainly a healthy helping of luck as well. Jay Howard also walked away, but perhaps the most dramatic of all the escapes was Helio Castroneves, who drove underneath the flying Scott Dixon, and despite slight damage, Helio would finish the race in second place. The appeal of the race car driver is that he, unlike the mere mortals, can cheat death at 240 miles an hour. The danger is an element that has been a part of IndyCar racing since the very beginning. Every driver who steps in a race car is aware of the risks. 106 times the bravest drivers in the world have strapped into their race cars and done battle over 500 miles. Stay tuned throughout the month as we cover the Indianapolis 500. Both here and in person. I think you'll enjoy our coverage. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and I'll see you in the next video.